America is the reason behind 9/11 because of its imperialistic agenda in the Middle East.
And that's Mamdani's father.
Suicide, yeah, Mamdani's father. Suicide bombing is a legitimate action, a legitimate act of self-defense against the Western imperialistic power.
All right, folks, you're in for something powerful today. I'm reacting to an interview with Dan Bawi, a former Muslim from Jordan who converted to Christianity, and he's breaking down exactly how Islam views the West and why Western leaders are making catastrophic mistakes by ignoring the threat. What makes this so compelling is Dan isn't some outside critic. He lived inside Islamic ideology, believed it sincerely, and now he's warning Americans about what's coming, especially with an Islamic communist candidate potentially becoming the next mayor of New York City. Make sure you stay through the entire thing, because the quotes he reveals from this candidate's father about justifying suicide bombing and blaming America for September 11th are absolutely jaw-dropping. Before we jump in, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're watching from. I always love seeing how far this community reaches. Let's get right into it.
There is no such a thing as radical Islamists. There are only Muslims and those who identify with Islam, but they are not really Muslims. If you are a true Muslim, you understand Islam really well. That's what the West called Islamist. But you are just an honest, sincere Muslim. And yes, at the time, I was an honest, sincere Muslim. Actually, I converted a girl from Oklahoma City to Islam. She was from a Christian background. I don't know her. I don't know how to get to her. So if she's watching this, please come back to the Lord. Wow. I'm sorry.
Wow, Dan. But you're more than making up for it now, my friend. And hey, give us your view, because before we dig into the book, your background's very important because you give the viewer a window into how Islam views the West and Israel. As an Islamist in Jordan, how did you view Israel, and how did you view the West writ large, Judeo-Christian civilization?
Well, in Islam, there is a hierarchy of the enemies of Allah. We had the Jews at the top of the list. The Jews were conspiring, plotting against Islam all the time. That's what we have learned. If we are to refer to someone as evil, that would be a Jew. We call that person, you're a Jew. If he's evil, that's how we describe evil people. So Christians, they are pagans. They're worshiping a prophet of Allah. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because Islam will at one point take over the world and we will establish the rule of Allah and everyone will be ruled by Islam. The people of the book, Christians and Jews, they will be offered the three options: convert to Islam, pay the jizya tax, or you will be killed. However, the pagans, the polytheists, they don't have that chance. They either convert to Islam or get killed. So that's the worldview that I had at the time.
Yeah, Dan, it's amazing to me that that view is very real, and you lived it, you experienced it. And yet here in the West, we have, in particular, the radical left, the so-called woke right as well, embracing Islam, embracing jihadists, and abandoning Israel. What do you make of that? It seems like a strange sickness we have here in the Western world.
Yeah, let me say that this whole civilizational war has been reduced to either you stand with Israel or you stand with Islam. There's no neutrality. There's no fence in this war. Of course, the radical left in the West, as a result of different agendas, different ideologies, different worldviews, they came to see Islam as minority, brown people, oppressed, non-Christian, non-Westerners, and the West is imperialist, colonialist, and the oppressor. And so they don't care about what Islam teaches, the history of Islam.
When Dan says there is no such a thing as radical Islamist, there are only Muslims and those who identify with Islam, but they are not really Muslims. If you are a true Muslim, you understand Islam really well. That's what the West called Islamist, but you are just an honest, sincere Muslim. He's sharing his personal theological understanding from when he practiced the faith. Islamic scholars and theologians have debated for centuries what constitutes authentic Islamic practice, with many different schools of thought reaching different conclusions. Dan is describing one specific interpretive tradition he encountered and believed, not representing the diverse range of beliefs held by the world's 2 billion Muslims, many of whom reject the views Dan is describing. He shares what he was taught about religious hierarchies growing up. In Islam, there is a hierarchy of the enemies of Allah. We had the Jews at the top of the list. The Jews were conspiring, plotting against Islam all the time. He describes how, if we are to refer to someone as evil that would be a Jew, we call that person, "You're a Jew." If he's evil, that's how we describe evil people. Dan is recounting the specific teachings he received in his community and educational environment. It's worth noting that many contemporary Muslim scholars and communities explicitly reject anti-Semitic interpretations and work toward interfaith understanding with Jewish communities. Dan then explains the classical jurisprudence framework he learned. The people of the book Christians and Jews will be offered 3 options. Convert to Islam, pay the jizya tax, or you will be killed. However, the pagans, the polytheists, they don't have that chance. They either convert to Islam or get killed. This describes historical Islamic legal frameworks documented in medieval jurisprudence texts. Islamic legal scholarship includes diverse opinions on these matters, with many modern Muslim scholars arguing these historical rules don't apply to contemporary contexts or require reinterpretation for pluralistic societies.
They're very selective when they talk about colonialism, for example. They always mention the history of the West, but they never mention the history of Islam when it comes to colonialism. And Islam, probably the biggest colonialist force in history.
The Islamic slave trade as well was very strong and still is in some places.
Absolutely, yeah. Slavery, only the Western man, Christian man, and Israel in their worldview today has become this Christian Western colonialist state. So they don't care it's the only Jewish state. No, in their mind, no, it's an extension of the Christian West, and we need to side with the oppressed minorities. What minorities? Muslims are 2 billion people. Yeah. And of course, they have converted Islam into a race. Islam is not a race, but they are dealing with it as if it is a race.
Dan, what do you make of Zoran Mamdani? He's a communist. He's an Islamist. He is, it looks right now like he may be the likely next mayor of America's largest city and financial capital, New York City. But it seems to me that he has a very sinister ulterior motive. Dan, how do you see his rise and what we can expect in New York if he comes to power there?
Well, I don't really know where to start, but this is the natural outcome of this alliance between the radical left and the Islamic movement in the West. But let me just say this because it's really important. Many Americans, they dismiss our warnings because they think that it's not possible for Sharia law or public beheading or morality police to take place in New York. You guys are decoupled from reality. They say that to us when we warn them. Well, I never said that with Zoran Mamdani we will end up with public beheadings or morality police. What I say is this: the mayor of the greatest city in the world has a lot of power. He will end up appointing tens, probably hundreds of people who align with him ideologically. Now, think of that. How is it going to affect the culture, the education, law enforcement? Of course, Zoran Mamdani, he hides behind his communist or socialist face, but I believe that he was shaped.
Dan raises a historical point worth examining. Islam probably the biggest colonialist force in history. Historians document that Islamic expansion from the 7th century onward spread through military conquest across multiple continents. Like other pre-modern empires, Roman, Mongol, Chinese, European, early Islamic caliphates expanded territory through warfare, established imperial administration, and engaged in practices including slavery and forced conversions. Acknowledging this historical reality doesn't justify any empire's actions, but provides context often missing from discussions that focus exclusively on Western European colonialism while overlooking other imperial systems. Dan addresses demographic realities. What minorities? Muslims are 2 billion people. And of course, they have converted Islam into a race. Islam is not a race, but they are dealing with it as if it is a race. This distinction matters for public discourse. Islam is a religious and ideological system encompassing diverse interpretations and practices. Treating it as an immutable racial identity rather than a belief system can shut down legitimate theological, political, and historical discussions by framing all critique as bigotry. Distinguishing between critiquing ideas versus attacking people based on ethnicity is essential for productive dialogue. The conversation shifts to political considerations about NYUNC mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. Dan explains the mayor of the greatest city in the world has a lot of power. He will end up appointing tens, probably hundreds of people who align with him ideologically. Now think of that. How is it going to affect the culture of the education law enforcement? Dan notes Mamdani hides behind his communist or socialist face, but everything about him was shaped by growing up with a father who is a radical communist, and he also comes from a religious background that sees the West as the great Satan. Voters evaluate candidates based on ideological formation, stated positions, and past associations. This is standard democratic accountability.
Everything about him was shaped by growing up with a father who is a radical communist, and he also comes from a religious background, that sees the West as the great Satan. Yeah. So both ideologies have given birth to this candidate, and now the people of New York are electing him to be the next mayor. So imagine what's going to happen.
And this is only 24 years after 9/11 in New York City. Hard to believe, Dan. And by the way, Mamdani
I encourage people to read Mamdani's father book, in which he said, and I quote, "America is the reason behind 9/11. Because of its imperialistic agenda in the Middle East."
And that's Mamdani's father.
Mamdani's father. Suicide bombing is a legitimate action, a legitimate act of self-defense against the Western imperialistic power. So just imagine what his son believes about America. And of course, we have seen globalize the Intifada. He refused to condemn Hamas. He just took a photo with a jihadist in New York. So this is going to be another London scenario. And if you want to see the future of New York City, just take a look at London.
Yeah, two things. Number one, that is Siraj Wahaj, an imam in New York City, who was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And Mamdani, you see him there, folks, pictured grinning with him, just having a great time. Secondly, you mentioned London, Mayor Sadiq Khan. London is unrecognizable now, Dan, as you know. Talk a bit more about the threat in Europe. It seems to me that Europe is going off a cliff, and I look at the UK in particular. Is it a stretch? And even Vice President J.D. Vance has suggested this. Is it a stretch to one day see a nuclear-armed Islamic government in the UK with the way things are going?
Dan references published writings from Mamdani's father that merit voter attention. America is the reason behind 9/11 because of its imperialistic agenda in the Middle East. This perspective attributes the attacks to American foreign policy rather than to the individuals who planned and executed them. Reasonable people can debate American foreign policy while still maintaining that those who carry out attacks on civilians bear moral and legal responsibility for their actions. Voters should be aware when candidates come from intellectual traditions that frame these events differently. The Fathers' published position on tactics. Suicide bombing is a legitimate action, was a legitimate act of self-defense against the Western imperialistic power. This represents an ideological position that endorses specific tactics targeting civilians. Democratic societies function when voters can access information about candidates' intellectual influences and the worldviews that shape them, allowing informed decisions about leadership in cities that have experienced these tactics firsthand. Eric notes a documented association. That is Siraj Wahhaj, an imam in New York City who was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. And Mamdani, you see him there, folks, pictured, grinning with him just having a great time. The 1993 incident preceded the 2001 attacks by 8 years. In democratic politics, candidates' associations and the company they keep provide voters with information about judgment, values, and priorities. Voters weigh these factors alongside policy positions when making electoral decisions. Dan offers a comparative framework. If you want to see the future of New York City, just take a look at London. London has experienced significant demographic, cultural, and political changes under various leadership, including Mayor Sadiq Khan. Whether one views these transformations positively or negatively depends on individual values and priorities. The comparison simply suggests that mayoral leadership influences urban development trajectories. Voters across the political spectrum benefit from examining how different leadership approaches shape cities over time, allowing them to make informed choices aligned with their own visions for their communities. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.